Welcome back, everyone. In this video, what we're going to do is we are going to create our nested routes. We have this page already that we want as our base route. So we need to figure out how to set this up as its own component. And then we need to set up this nested route while accounting for it in our current routing structure. So the first thing we need to do in order to make this component of shop nestable with its routes is we need to say, okay, when you start matching this path, I know there will be a subsequent URL parameter set after shop. Whatever that set is, I don't care. That's what this star represents. It's the wildcard. This just means that I want you to match shop / anything. It doesn't matter. As long as you match that, I want you to forward them and render this component, the shop component. Because now the shop component is going to have its own routes inside. Now, before we actually start implementing the routes, we need to duplicate this into the appropriate page component. Because now this shop component is going to be a collection preview. So let's make a new route folder. And I want to call this my categories preview because we're previewing multiple categories. And similarly, of course, we'll need the categories.styles.sass. And we'll also need a categories/preview.component.jsx. Actually, I misspelled this. This is not just categories. This is categories/preview. There we go. Now, inside of the categories, wow, I cannot spell categories. There we go, categories. I'm going to paste in the appropriate code that we had from before. So all of these are still relative. So you can double check. This is going to the correct context. This is going to the correct preview. And what we need to do now is we need to modify this. So instead of importing from shop, this is now categories-preview. And this component will now be categories preview. We no longer need we still need the categories map because all of this functionality is still going to stay the same. Except the only difference here is that instead of category preview container should be the name instead of shop container. So everything else though is the exact same. We actually already had this component fully finished. It was just a bunch of updates to the naming and also for preview styles. We didn't even have any styles. So actually, since we don't have any styles, we don't even need this file. Let's get rid of this. And inside, we don't need this import for the styles file anyways. If we're not adding styles, there's really no need. And if this div isn't doing anything, then we can also replace this div with a fragment, which as we learned about this shorthand of just doing this for fragment. But again, as I mentioned, for consistency's sake, let's just import fragment like so. And let's bring this categories preview now into our shop component. So now our shop component doesn't need any of this anymore. Now what it primarily needs is nested routing. So this means that we need to import in routes and route. The reason why is because you cannot use a route component unless its immediate parent is a routes component from React router DOM. So here we don't need this context. In fact, we don't need any of this code. Let's get rid of all of this. And let's start creating our routes. So here I'm going to say routes is going to match a route where the index route is going to render the element of our new collections preview or categories preview. So here let's import this in. Import in categories preview from categories preview route. And then we're going to render the full component. And now if I save this and I go back to my application, there we see it. Everything is still present. So nothing has broken yet. If we come back now, we need to add an additional route for our new category individually. But before we do that, let's just quickly go over what we had done. The main thing with nested routes is that you want to say with React Router DOM, React Router DOM takes a look at the path value and it says, hey, Whenever I match this path inside of the URL relative to what my parent path is, I am going to render this element that you've given me for this route. Now, what we're saying is that, hey, if you match shop / any wildcard of whatever URL parameters that follow, render the shop. Because inside of the shop, you can expect further routes. And these routes are all going to be relative to the parent route, which was shop /. Whatever is rendered inside as the parameter will be dealt with inside of this route. So this is the benefit of nesting the code like so. Now what we can do is we can actually build the next category route, which utilizes a URL parameter. And we'll learn about that in the next video. But really, if you think about nesting routes this way, it becomes much more intuitive as to what's happening. Because remember, the whole thing about the path is that the path just matches the URL, and then React Router DOM is like, oh, I'm just going to render this element. Anything afterwards here, I'm not going to worry about, because the fact that you did this means that you have routes set up for that component that will carry on and figuring it out. And this is true for any subsequent children routes that get nested. They're going to follow a similar pattern. Right now, we just have an index route, but in the next component, we're going to do a dynamic URL parameter based route. So let's do that in the next video together.